Tonight we're with Frater Puck, Peter, who is a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, which is probably best known for Aleister Crowley, the legendary, notorious English occultist. He didn't found the organization, but he sort of adopted it and
you could say that, yeah.
Modified it.
He definitely modified it.
Yeah. So he changed it. What would you say to what percentage from when he first...
You mean as far as population?
Oh, interesting.
Or in terms of what? Oh, his percentage of changing it.
Yeah.
That depends on who you ask, of course. There's lots of different answers to that. I would argue that it was changed dramatically. I don't know what percentage I would give, but
right.
It was originally a assortment, a synthesis of many different Masonic traditions, Masonic lineages, initiation series. And he added Thelema. Okay, so that informs all of the initiations. It informs the whole process that is OTO. In a fundamental way, it's changed. You know, there's not swearing on a Bible, they're swearing on the book of the law.
Right. And he found a resonance from what he was already previously with Thelema. He found a harmony with the OTO, do you think? That
I would say so.
Jump as a jumping off point,
sure,
and move further. And Thelema, I know you from your podcast, Thelema Now, which is an internet podcast, which is about the OTO, about Aleister Crowley and the occult, and you interview artists and people somehow related to Crowley or the occult in their, and I think you mainly interview artists. Who have you interviewed?
It's not mainly artists, but
right.
I have an agenda.
Okay.
It's the interesting thing is that it's the podcast presented by the OTO U.S. Grand Lodge. Okay, so it's the official National Grand Lodge podcast of the Ordo Templi Orientis.
Okay.
However, its purpose is outreach. Its purpose is not to necessarily go in depth with Thelema exactly.
Right.
There's podcasts that do that. There's a great podcast, Speech in the Silence. That's
right.
an OTO podcast also, and they're much more in depth as far as what a Thelemite, someone who studies Thelema, would want to really dive into.
Right. So you speak of.
We're trying. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Just to finish my kind of
sure.
idea is that we have artists, but we also have writers. We
right.
have all kinds of people because some are very much where Thelemites were into Crowley, were into magic or whatever,
right.
and some are interested in ritual, interested in magic, maybe not necessarily Crowley. Some are not necessarily willing to say or even view themselves as ritualists or magicians, but I do. And I have an agenda where I try to present what I see as someone who, and this is what I think is the core thing, is that if it's an artist and someone's going, this guy doesn't say he's a Thelemite, he doesn't say he's interested in Crowley. In fact, when I ask him a question, he may even say, I'm not really interested in magic or the occult or anything. But he'll say, I don't want to be controlled by a record label, I don't want to be controlled by this or that. Once they start talking like that,
right.
and they've blazed this individual trail
right.
and had an impact where other people somehow still find out about them and have this career
right.
where they are influencing many, many people with what I see as magic. Their work is a ritual. Their work is art and magic.
They're just not calling it that.
They're just not calling it
right.
that. And I'm the last one, as a Thelemite, to tell anybody what to call anything. So, but it's
but
obvious.
You recognize it
yes,
there
and
very
that's
clearly.
what I want to present. So that's always what I try to do.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
So some Thelemites listen to the podcast
right.
and go, that guy's not a Thelemite. In fact,
right.
he says he doesn't really like Crowley, and it's like, I don't care, because listen to what he's saying.
Right.
He's blazing his trail, or
right.
she's blazing her trail.
Right.
And
They're following their
They're following,
will.
and we're talking about how when they encountered these obstacles, what they did
Yeah.
about it, and still did their will. So to
Right.
me, that's thelema.
Right.
So they're a perfect guest then. You know?
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. I was going to say about outreach. You said is the program's sort of agenda, and occult, strictly means hidden, and sort of with the internet, kind of like nothing's hidden, or it's harder to be hidden unless we find out there's a cabal off the grid, and we'll find out
Yeah,
later.
and then now they're not hidden.
Right, but but in a way, your podcast and the emphasis of outreach is to come out of hiding in a certain sense. And do some people say no, we want to keep hidden, and we're not about outreach? Or do you have any comments?
You gave me 3 different lines of comments I could give.
Okay, sorry.
Well, no, it's without getting into semantics, but
Right.
You're right. Occult means hidden, and the beauty of it is, even with the internet and secrets, the Masonic secrets have been published for years. Our secrets are published. We don't want that to be the case.
Right.
We've fought to try to not have that be the case, but you can go on the internet and you can find anything. However, as someone who's gone through initiation and also seen other things written down, read them, and then also experienced them, or anyone who's ever had a similar experience like that, it's not the same thing. Reading music isn't listening to music.
Right.
Reading a menu isn't eating the food.
Right.
Reading a ritual isn't necessarily experiencing the ritual. So there's a certain part that will always be occult and always hidden. But there are secrets that, we would prefer weren't out there, but the real secrets are incommunicable, and you have to plant that kind of seed within yourself through real life connections to these things. So intellectually you can find out a lot of things, but it works on many different planes.
Right.
So as far as it being, like, even doing a podcast on the internet seems the opposite of being occult or hidden, but the OTO was always a temporal order. It's a Masonic, it's not truly a Masonic order anymore, but its history is that. And those orders, while they had secrets, also had a public face, a public interface with people, and they were part of their communities, and they tried to influence their communities. Some people see conspiracy in that, others see being concerned about society in that.
Right.
And the OTO would be in the same vein as that. So it's semi-private, really.
Right.
Obviously, we have a web page. We have many web pages. All the lodges and different bodies have web pages. So how hidden is it?
Right.
The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club.
Right.
And that's the second rule, too. If we were truly, totally hidden,
Right.
I wouldn't be talking to you.
Right.
You wouldn't know about it.
Right.
We blew it the minute you knew about it.
Right.
So, occult has lots of meanings. There are certain things that are hidden in plain sight. There are certain things that even if you've studied for many years, later on you will go like this and go, that's always been there, because there are blinds, there are things you learn, there are things that only your life experience of doing this work lets you see what you thought you saw. Now you see on another level in a different angle.
Definitely.
So things are always being revealed. There's always a
Right.
constant revelation, and so there's always a hidden part.
Right.
And that's really the real meaning of the occult, is that you're exploring these things that can only be revealed. The veil can only be drawn when you're worthy to draw, for it to be drawn. It can't be sullied. It's impossible to. That's the true occult. So even though we have an outreach, and you can say, you're not hidden, you're not private,
Right.
you're not secret,
Right.
there's a part that always will be until you're ready.
Right. It's interesting when you talk about, a lot of times, I'm older and I have younger friends and I try to say, oh, you should do this or this, but I'm learning that even if I went back to myself a long time ago and said, this is the road you should take, look,
Sure.
I'm you 30 years ago, and take my advice, I probably wouldn't have given it. And it's really about the lessons from life lived that a person has to sort of find. And that is, in a sense, hidden until that person actually experiences it,
Sure.
and discovers it. So in a broader sense, a lot of raising of consciousness really has to do about immersing oneself in any kind of activity of life, and
Sure.
discovering for themselves a truth or a lot of it I see is like many doors are open, and I go down this one at age 20, and then I sense me there, and then I decide to go through this door, and then at age,
Sure.
40, I see that old door again, and I say, I could go down that door again, but perhaps I won't, because I have a pretty good idea that last time I went. So how about I try this door?
Sure.
So at the same time, you're not going through certain doors. You're choosing the doors that resonate more with who you are. So it's a
Sure.
matter of making choices and kind of which limits freedom, but then it's actually focusing.
Well,
Does that make any sense to you?
Of course it does.
Yeah.
And, well, limiting freedom. Self-control is the way to freedom. You have to be able to make a decision cutting off these options that will waste your energy.
Yes.
We can all say we're going to identify with Godhead and be divine. We're all these stars, and we can all just push our way through the universe doing our will. But the reality is, while we can do that,
Right.
we have to contend with the forces around us.
Right.
Okay? You don't escape your incarnation's circumstances.
Right.
So you have to navigate them.
Right.
Well, that takes energy. That
Yeah.
takes focus. That takes
Discipline.
discipline and all those things. Without somehow limiting yourself
Yeah.
so that you can do those things, you basically flounder because you're pulled in every direction.
Right. So none, in a
at
way.
some point,
Yeah.
the freedom is choosing.
Right.
The freedom is what you decide you're going to focus on, and what you're going to do about it, and not letting those other things that could stop you from doing that get in the way.
Right.
Well, Western civilization is a constant distraction. It's all distraction around you.
Right.
It's designed for maximum distraction if you look at it a certain way.
Yes.
Okay. It's not really about us all like getting within ourselves and that type of thing. But the interesting thing about this path is also that it's not just meditation where you withdraw from the world.
Right.
So the trick is, how do you be this focused person almost in your monastery at all times
Right.
in the real world?
Right. You're present, but you also have
And
an
engaged
interior.
in the world. There's
Right.
a battle. I mean, people get kind of hung up on some of the warlike imagery in the Book of the Law, but
Right.
it's about, there's many battles. It doesn't all have to be seen in the most, though it's totally relevant if it's seen in that way, the most violent physical way.
Right.
But it's the violence within the marketplace of ideas contending with each other.
Right.
There's all of, that impacts in many ways in a deeper way than physical things, because it gets to the root of children, it gets to the root of societies, it informs whole cultures, and there's a war in that too. And
Right.
not all cultures, as beautiful as some might be, are about freedom
Right.
of the individual.
Yeah.
And that's a paramount thing in Thelema.
Yes. Okay. You were talking, I mean, in a sense, well, I gather that talking about have as a ritual or a ceremonial magician, some might see that. I just wanted to sort of highlight your point of you don't want to get to a state where it's solipsistic, where I can't function with the rest of the world. Even though you're doing this meditative internal work, has it made you more or less effective within the world? You kind of answered the question, but...
Well, if you're
Or
asking
maybe-
me personally, it's been an ongoing struggle different ways. I mean,
Right.
in all honesty, I've been better at it at times and worse at it at times.
Yeah.
There's a series of initiations and a process that goes on, and you're always learning. And even if you take many years of work in a certain direction, doing certain initiations, you may find that you revisit some of the earlier ones again, almost as like a higher octave of the same idea. So dealing with the rest of the world is a challenge,
Yeah.
because you are against the common, easiest way to go about that path.
Right.
The path of being part of society isn't really your path, yet you need to be part of that path.
Right.
So there is that issue. You'll find that if you take that kind of course of training of initiation, that you may have similar issues that other people have, and you'll be able to talk to them about it. But there will be some that are strictly your own.
Yeah.
And much is made about, like some people are justifiably concerned about what they're digging up when they but start kicking up some of these subtler things that are your consciousness.
Yes.
You can make light of it, like, well, that's not real, it's in your head or whatever,
Right.
but it informs how you see reality, so
Yeah.
it's very important. Some people are very cavalier about it, and I'm going to invoke everything and do all this stuff, and
Right.
there can be issues with that. And then some people are too timid, which doesn't work either.
Right.
So you have to have kind of a healthy respect, but also the courage to do it.
Right.
And in doing that, that does withdraw you from the rest of society for a
Yeah.
while to deal with those things. You have to know when it's time to get back with people again,
Right.
and when it's time to pull away.
Right.
And that has to be an internal. You have to have an internal barometer that kind of tells you when it's that time.
Mm-hmm.
There are issues with people that, it takes some adjustment.
Yeah.
But I can say that I've, at the present time, it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
There's been times it was difficult. There's other times I thought I had it sussed, and then it was difficult again. So,
Right.
It's
I
a
think-
constant journey.
Yeah, I think many people can relate. I mean, when people define magic as changing things in accordance to one's will, could one also say that, I mean, I think like artists in a lot of ways are magicians, like someone like John Cage, instead of, he actually made, noise and silence. He put it in the context of art, and so we actually, instead of changing the noise, it changed our perception. Is that another, and in that way, he changed things in accordance to, his will to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
And so changing one's consciousness is a legitimate way of changing sort of the world. So,
Absolutely.
So now it's second nature for people to take, a jackhammer or whatever and put it into, a dance. Noise
course,
is
yeah.
now music. Silence is now music because of that innovation.
Absolutely.
And so you would deem that sort of, in some sense,
Absolutely.
magic.
Of course, yeah. It doesn't even, I've actually already thought it, so I don't even have to go, yeah, you know what? It's like, no,
Right.
of course.
No, I think-
In fact, some of my arguments with about what guests I'd like to have is along those lines, because
because I think you get in a lot of trouble when you try to change, other people and sort. But sometimes, if we can change our perception, that there's a lot of power in that, and that we do have a lot of control, or we can manage a lot.
I wish I could
than-
remember the quote, but and it's always lazy to quote somebody else.
Right.
But Buckminster Fuller had a great quote about changing society, which I'm going to screw up, but the gist of it is that you don't change the existing system by attacking the system. You change the existing system by coming up with a new form that makes the other system obsolete.
Yes.
So when you have a John Cage that says, this period of silence is my peace.
Right.
He's changed the whole system, because the minute you accept that, it's a completely different ballgame now.
Yeah.
It opens up so many other doors, where if he got into a discussion to fight with people about the idea of doing it, it's almost by insisting that he's just going to do it. He did his act of will.
Right.
The universe responded to it.
And Burroughs' definition of art is that the artist makes the audience aware of what they know but didn't know they know.
Sure.
So it is a raising of consciousness.
Sure.
Here's actually what's been going on the whole time, and now I'm going to give you a window to look through and see it. So I find very much magic going on in the arts and in that way, and so I think that's kind of what bridged me to find your podcast.
That was your connection to even being interested?
Yeah, and be interested. So Thelema Now is the podcast. You can find it on the internet.
ThelemAnow.com, yes.
THELEMA now.com.
That's it.
All right, is there anything else you'd like to say on the show?
No, that's good. I mean,
all right.
It was fun.
Thank you very much for coming on, and viewers of the Deprogramming Hour, we will see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, that was great.
Okay, cool.
Were you happy?
Sure, yeah.
It came to a sort of natural end, so instead of extend it,
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, if you want to talk about Burroughs, I could go on and on and on. We could do a whole series, man.
If we, that can be the show too, if you want.
No, because Burroughs is interesting because there's a whole.
I'll put my
Are you still? Oh yeah, you're still recording.
I have tape, so why not?
We're supposedly done. So as the pontification starts flowing, bear that in mind. We thought we were done. Burroughs is about challenging language and how a question of whether language is freeing you and your consciousness or enslaving you.
Right.
And attacking the control images, etc. It's all about that. And
that's what he meant as a virus. A word is a virus. Or,
he could have meant that a couple of ways.
Okay.
I agree with that, but a message of freedom can be a virus too, and that frees people, and it's a virus in that it spreads. But just cut up theory, freeing things up, changing the order of the words, and then because words form language which you interpret and then informs your consciousness, by cutting up the language, you break up barriers in your consciousness. You open up other doors, as you said. And Burroughs is a perfect example of somebody that was interested in ceremonial magic.
Yeah.
That I resonate with personally. That I can't get enough of thinking along those lines because it informs a lot of how I want to break through my own issues and my own consciousness walls.
I think when I resonated as a teenager to existentialism and the idea that we are really the ones who are bringing meaning to the world, and we are the meaning makers, and so we can't really. And it's a Frankenstein's monster type thing. Well, I've created this word to represent this idea or or this organization or whatever, and then suddenly it becomes, I believe the word more than I believe my true nature that was the spark that said, oh, I need a word to represent this so I can communicate this to other people. So it's the same, like Robert Anton Wilson idea of the map is not the territory. We must always know that these are tools, but it's our meaning making that said, oh, this tool means this.
Of course.
Otherwise, it could almost mean anything.
Yeah, and you can't get out of the need to make the tools in the first place.
Right.
Because as you are a baby and you encounter the world, you see the wide-eyed look of a baby. Perhaps the closest we ever get to that is psychedelics, where we actually experience the world that wide-eyed and
or even
holy shit, Yeah. And then you learn what things are supposed to mean.
Right.
And you have all these guidelines about what things are supposed to mean. And it restricts you, but it also means you can cross the street without getting hit by a car. You know how to feed yourself.
Right.
You know how to communicate with each other. But then how can you have both? How can you try to get back to that wide open experience of the universe, which I think a lot of what magic is trying to get to that. Yes. And yet still have the control of what you're doing with it.
Right.
And
the
things
door
have meanings.
Right.
And existentialism is all about, we make the meaning.
Right.
Which is a much better way to deal with things than nihilism anyway.
Yeah.
And it's funny, it's not funny, it's obvious that you would mention Robert Anton Wilson because he's like my gateway drug to all of this.
Okay.
I really just thought playing with the occult is amusing but is bullshit, and who cares? It's like mental mind games.
Right.
And then you read Robert Anton Wilson and he has the right kind of skepticism about things, but the right amount of openness. In other words, okay, we're going to do something crazy now. We're going to invoke this, and we're going to see what's going to happen.
Right.
And while we're doing it, we're believing it.
Right.
Because if we're not going to allow ourselves for this to have meaning, if we're just going to make a joke of it, it's not going to work.
Right.
We're going to believe it. We're going to do it all the way. We're going to inflame ourselves fully with it.
Because we have magical thinking. It's just a part to deny.
It's part of our human experience. So to study it makes sense.
Right.
But now that it's happened, we've just done something, and we all thought we talked to God.
Right. But
what the hell really happened? And let's look at it. So he had both, and the sense of humor too.
Yeah.
So it was like there's a way I can study this, which I can't deny I'm interested in, and yet it doesn't insult my intelligence. I'm not supposed to just believe in something or just be like groovy about it, man. I can
Right.
actually
integrate your sort of
exactly.
thinking or intellectual or
Yet
or
I have the
analytical
excuse to
mind.
have the experience,
Right.
and it's valid because it is what humans do. I'm a human, so
Right.
it makes sense for me to consider why I would think I'm seeing God.
Yeah.
Why do I search for God? Why do
Right.
I even question whether there would be one?
Right.
Why do I think about something like meaning?
Right.
Because if there is no meaning,
Mm-hmm.
even if you could conclusively prove there is no meaning, nothing means anything.
Right.
As humans, we still walk around trying to find it. So it's still valid for us to figure out why the hell we're doing that.
Right.
So it's perfect.
Right.
You can, and your only experience of your universe is going to be you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't you study that?
Right.
So he gave me a way to see how I'm studying me.
Yeah.
I'm studying what meaning is,
Right.
why it means anything. What meaning is meaning, you know.
And two things come up. I think even people getting back to the womb, this oceanic all is one. I think there's a memory there that I think through meditation and certain sort of mystical practices we have that recall, which might still be from an earthbound state. That not necessarily the wonder of the baby, but even before of the sense of being in the womb and this oceanic, and there's no separation between the mother and that's kind of where people go when they have these mystical states. And the other thing, when you talked about Robert Anton Wilson and about, we're going to do this and we're going to see where it goes and then we're going to step back and be analytical about it. I mean, there's the quote of, I like the subgenius that we pull the wool over our own eyes. I loved that expression.
Yeah.
And it also reminded me of the Crowley quote, which is, you will know better than I do, but the method of science, like something of religion.
Right.
What is that? The actual
the
quote.
method of science, the aim of religion.
The aim of religion.
Yeah.
Which I think recalls sort of what Robert Anton Wilson was doing.
Sure.
So, all right. That started with Burroughs and ended with Robert Anton Wilson. This could be an extra on the internet.
We have to get James Joyce in there and we're set.
Perfect. I know a Joyce scholar. But he would always grab me inappropriately at parties. And apparently Joyce is it's not just about dirty jokes. There's more to it. So we'll have to have him on the show. We'll all three talk about Joyce when we get Sam here. All right. So good night, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully
Yeah, actually, that would be cool because I'm fascinated by the 100 thunder words. From 100 thunder words? Yeah, I think it's Finnegan's Wake, right?
Yes.
100. No, I always wanted to do a ritual with 100.
The Joyce, the lost Joyce.
I always wanted
episode.
to do a ritual with 100 thunder words because a lot of, magic deals with consciousness and words. Much is made in certain rituals of using barbarous names of evocation. And the question always is, okay, so I'm memorizing how to say all these alien words.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Do they mean anything? And again, you get into that question, it doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Obviously, even using a language you're not familiar with in a way that you're told this is what it means, you have an out-of-body experience because you're not using a language is your everyday language.
Right.
You're using a language you're not familiar with. They tend to turn into these power words. They are a shortcut to getting to a state of consciousness that is different than us just talking now. In barbarous names of evocation, the ritual is Liber Shamek.
Mm-hmm.
You can study what they mean, but believe me, if you actually just do it with full heart, you don't know what's going on by the time you're done. That's the point. You're really evoking something.
Mm-hmm.
And
do people have the same shared sort of experience?
It's on a continuum.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a continuity, but obviously everybody's going to be different.
Right.
Plus, everyone's informed by the fact that they know what the ritual is supposed to be about.
Right.
It's about contacting your holy guardian angel, basically.
Right.
So they're going to be informed by that,
Mm-hmm.
But back to James Joyce, back to the wordplay,
Right.
back to puns within puns. but also it's not quite English anymore, but it is.
Mhm.
It's just particularly Finnegan's Wake. It's just difficult enough that if you're willing to go there, you have an altered state of consciousness understanding what's happening, because it's not just delivered to you easily.
Right.
But because I'm fascinated with ritual and I'm fascinated with evoking things, and you have the 1,001, 101, excuse me, 101 thunder names that are these long lettered names.
Does that come from Joyce, or
That's
what
Joyce.
that you're referring to? Okay.
And it would be fascinating to do a ritual with it, because I'd like to see what, well, maybe I don't want to see what happens, but
Right.
I'm curious to see what happens.
If there was a stretcher there and an ETM.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
There might have to be a defibrillator there.
There'll have to be that acid crash tent at Woodstock. You know,
Yeah.
I'm
You'll
aging
be
myself.
okay in a little bit.
We'll bring
Have-
wavy gravy in, and you'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Take it easy. It's okay. Everything's coming. You'll
Don't
have
eat
a
the
rational
brown
thought
acid.
again. Really.
Yeah, you'll have a rational thought again.
You haven't had that experience where you're like, "This was great. The first 6 hours was great, but this can end now." And the relief of like, "Oh yeah, that's a normal thought."
Wow.
Okay, good. But
Hello again. So,
So you want to have a James Joyce scholar on who grabs you inappropriately at parties?
I'm hoping that he's matured now that he's procreated, that maybe he won't feel the need to feel the need.
Right. Yeah.
I think he's just socially awkward, and he's very brainy, and
He was being playful,
he was being playful, but
inappropriately.
inappropriately, as far as
Play
I
is
was
so
concerned.
often inappropriate, though.
Yeah.
Hence, play.
Yeah. But I don't know where to go with the conversation now.
Yeah.
So but
These
I-
are all extras.
the
You
only-
just click on the DVD, you know.
The only thing that came to mind was that where there's a foreign word introduced, it really says, okay, here is, you bring to it, here is the word that you don't know what it means, or you have a vague idea. Okay, you fill in the gaps. So it's very much like, we're going to introduce something that has shades of meaning, and you fill it in, I think. And so it becomes more intimate and more powerful. Actually, what I thought of, is almost the most magical word in kind of anyone's life is their name. Like when you call someone in a crowd, call out their name, suddenly it's almost instinctive, like especially if they were born with that name, or,
Sure.
as they call it. But I think that's probably the most magical thing. So a lot of times if I want to build rapport with someone, I will call them by name, and sometimes that even intimidates me, and like, oh, I can't call them that name. It's so like resonant.
It makes a big difference, though.
What? Calling?
To say someone's name, especially someone you've just met.
Yeah.
It's like yeah.
Carrie. Sorry.
Stop.
Interrupt.
Now I don't even know where I am. But, a lot of times, if you've just met someone, I've done it both ways, because I've always been fascinated by it too.
Mm-hmm.
Where people really react positively to you saying their name back to them.
Right.
You've paid attention to what their name is.
Yeah.
If it could be just our kind of lifestyle in a city, but I feel like I meet people all the time, and you may see them again. If you've made an effort to know their name, they're like a good friend all of a sudden, because there's so many people that you might see from time to time, and you're like, oh, I don't know. I hope I don't have to introduce you, because I don't remember that person's name.
Right.
But yeah, it does have an impact. And if somebody yells your name, but they're talking to somebody else, you don't realize it till you check it out.
Right.
So yeah, we're ruled by words in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
There's magic in words.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we have society. I mean, you can say it's because of any number of things, but the fact that we can see what happened before, that the reason why we all get born into a society and think there's a society there is because we all think it's there, and we all act like it is.
Mm-hmm.
If we all stopped knowing that it would be chaos. There would be no society.
Right.
We'd try to figure out how to eat and stuff like that, and there'd be all this stuff in the way, and we wouldn't know what it was.
Right.
But we all have this culture that we're brought up in, and a lot of it has accelerated because of the written word.
Mm-hmm.
And now with technology, it's accelerating even more all the time. Back to Robert Anton Wilson, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
But for everything that's good about it, individually,
Mm-hmm.
you give something up.
Right.
And a lot of personal magical work would be trying to have your cake and eat it too, pretty
Okay.
much. Have access to all the benefits of all this,
Right.
and still be able to get it out of the way when you need it out of your way.
Right.
You're not ruled by this culture,
Right.
but you're in it.
Right. So, have you always lived in the city? I'm thinking about the retreating and the meditation, that there's this chaotic world.
I've always lived in New York when
Yeah.
I took any of this seriously.
Okay. Is there a part about the sort of maddening, chatter and noise of a urban city that has anything to do with wanting to retreat and do you know what I'm saying? How does the environment affect your spiritual life or
It's a good question.
I mean, if you were in the Walden's Pond, would you
in the pond?
No, in a cabin next to it with a roaring fire and a pipe and a dog.
I love
and
that too. I like both,
Right.
but
Do you find you have to escape from the
No.
noise more in the city than you would if you were living in nature?
No.
Not necessarily. Oh, that's interesting.
no, but I've had enough experience with different types of environments.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, my whole childhood, I moved like every 3 years.
Huh.
So that, which may explain a lot. I don't know,
Right.
but I was actually born in Texas. Okay, and where I was there was not bustling.
Mm-hmm.
But then I lived where it was bustling in Texas, and then I
How
lived
old
in
were you at that point?
very young.
Okay.
But up to 5.
Right.
And then around the time I was 8, I was up in Connecticut, so
Okay.
that's not bustling.
Right.
But
You
so
had
I've
to
had
make
a
new
lot.
friends and stuff, though.
Sure,
Maybe
sure.
as a kid, it was a bit disruptive. Yeah.
I don't remember it bothering me,
Okay.
but I always would meet people and have friends, and then they would talk about how they've had a friend since kindergarten. I'd be like, "What's that like?" I always had to have new friends, but
Right.
but half my life I've been in New York now.
Right.
And this is something we have in common. My attraction to filmmaking is what made me come to New York.
Right.
I studied at NYU,
Me too.
and I did video editing on music videos and worked on stuff and different TV shows and whatever. And this is around the time I'm like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. I'm 24 by the time I actually even seriously think I'm going to meet a bunch of strange people in a dark room and be in some kind of magical order and take magic seriously.
Right.
But if I look at my life before that, there's always been things that kind of teased me to be interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
I was always interested in musicians that seemed to know this Crowley guy. There
Yeah.
was I'm at NYU going to my experimental workshop, and we're watching some films, and
Harry
the films
Smith.
are Harry Smith, Kenneth Anger. Here we go.
Right.
It all leads you right back to it. So I'm walking by bookstores, coincidentally, not
Right.
ironically, I know the meaning of irony. Coincidentally, I'm walking by where the lodge is meeting
Okay.
in New York, but I don't know it for years.
Right.
Probably going to the same places around there, same bookstores.
Right.
Seeing these books and going, it would be kind of cool to have a Crowley book. I'll buy one, Oh, wow, I'm going to read it. Wow, I'm going to take it seriously. Then I read Robert Anton Wilson, and I dive all the way in.
Right.
Find out the OTO still exists. Can't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Get the courage to contact him. Get the courage to show up. Get the courage to dive in. Realize I've been walking by them for years. All in the village, right near each
And
other.
you're still around 24? Is that? Or?
Around that time, yeah.
Okay.
24 was, well, of course, for those familiar with the 23 skidoo whole bit, it's all 23s, It was
Right.
2 days before my 23rd birthday when I wrote the letter
Uh-huh. Okay.
to the OTO.
Right.
It seemed like it took 23 years for them to write me back. This is before email and stuff like that, but Bill Heydrich did the best he could with
Okay.
the technology of the time. But yeah, when I was 23 is actually.
Right.
24 was when I think I finally felt it was a direction and not just a, like I wasn't dabbling, but
Right.
I took it seriously, but it took me probably a year before I was like, this is it, you know,
Yeah,
this is the path
yeah.
I'm taking.
And
Rather,
you think that Robert Anton Wilson was really a fulcrum, if I'm using that word correctly. I love that word. I don't know if I'm using it correctly. I just love how it sounds. But I mean, as far as saying, like, I can pursue this without giving up sort of my rational mind or logical mind or
yeah.
analytical mind, perhaps. You know, I can explore these things and then I can sit back and go, like, what really
Actually,
happened?
what he did,
Is that-
he did a couple great things for
Yeah.
me. Crowley already does that. Crowley is as off the wall as anyone might think he ever was.
Right.
When you read him and why his work, I think, becomes more important to more people as time goes on.
Yeah.
As much as they hear lots of reasons to avoid him, and somehow he still gets people who there's scholars studying him now.
Yeah, yeah.
There's scholarly work about him
Right.
now. It's finally
Right.
the people taking it seriously, is because whatever his faults,
Right.
he was very smart.
Right.
He took it all very seriously. He studied many different cultures, created an interesting synthesis of different traditions, and said, do this scientifically.
Right.
Don't just believe what I'm telling you.
It's kind of
Don't
radical,
just believe what that it's supposed to do anything in particular. In fact, he said, I did these things and these are the results I got.
Right.
I can't say you're going to get these results.
Right.
All I can say is do this work and you'll get results.
Right.
And keep a record of it.
Right.
And be critical of the results.
Right.
So he was already giving me both worlds. But how would I know? Unless somebody gives me a way to find out about
Right.
him. That's what Robert Anton Wilson
Yeah.
was. You know, I find out about Robert Anton Wilson because I'm fascinated with any kind of outlaw culture, Loom Panic's catalog,
Right.
that type of thing, clandestine activities, people being free even though the man wants to hold them down.
Right.
And it leads me right to this Robert Anton Wilson guy, and this whole other thing opens up
Yeah.
about freedom on an inner plane. And it led me back to things I kind of was interested in but didn't know how to reconcile. And then reading Crowley seriously, I realized it's there too.
Right.
The other thing Robert Anton Wilson gave me was, besides a great sense of humor about everything,
Yeah.
because you have to have that. There's two things you need. You know you're in trouble if you get involved in any of this and you don't have these two things.
Right.
Or try to get them. Try to have them. A sense of humor about everything, especially yourself. Common sense.
Right.
Common sense. It's maybe the most important thing. The craziness that you can experience will require you to have common sense about how to deal with impulses and what comes up, you
Right.
know, and what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And by common sense, as uncommon as it seems at times, it means, you know, balance is good. You're exploring things that are extremely imbalancing on purpose, because society and just being nice and calm and docile is very balanced. You'll have no problems. You might not be happy, but you'll have no problems as far as your day-to-day life. But if you start playing with your consciousness, you have to address things that arise, and that may affect your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So it's common sense to say, you know what, I'm going to not do this, maybe do that. Or I need to make sure I'm doing this in the right place.
Yeah.
Sometimes those lines get blurred.
Yeah. And sense of humor also actually is a way of retreating. I think immediately going back to the Fool card to kind of go like, well, it's kind of a way, when laughter is, I find something, is a spiritual release.
I think
and for
it
me,
is.
I mean, it's like, everybody sort of thinks that spiritual is just this, this blissful state, but it's also you can have a disruptive, disease, fear-based spiritual state. You know?
I think so,
and
yeah.
And laughter is really a healthy spiritual release where, in response to kind of the absurdity of the world, and a retreat to, but it's a safe spiritual place to be spiritual. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you might be in this dangerous, like fear-based space, to lift yourself out. Sometimes laughter will It kind of like
Absolutely.
pull you out of some darkness that you're taking much too seriously and talking back to. I love that guy who was on your show. I can't remember who it was, but he had these like really crazy, like scary experiences with like demons or whatever. But then he just realized that his fear was what they fed on, and it's the same way I think of people having panic attacks, you know, and that the fear, you know, with panic attacks it's more, and him it was demons, whatever. We call it different things. It has things arrive with different faces, but
sure,
it's still the idea that fear kind of can make this loop, make this like feedback, and just feed on itself.
Absolutely.
And once that guy who was dealing with these demons
Which
realized,
guy was this?
I can't remember.
Because there's
I
a
think
couple.
He was like Texas or something, and
he's from Texas.
I don't know. I really should have done my research. But he was saying,
Jason Ritchie?
once I realized
be,
not to be afraid of these, you know, demons, then they lost their power, and then I could actually be okay. So it's like, so the idea of fear, like drawing people into these loops, whether it was this guy, and once he found a way to not be afraid, that suddenly it lost its power, and that it's kind of a fuel that if you keep feeding like a panic attack, it's kind of going to just be, feedback in music. It just gets louder and louder and louder till it's piercing and someone has to unplug something. But,
no, I think that's a very important thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the critical things. You know, people are afraid of the occult.
Right.
And there's a reason, because I don't know what people think they're afraid of, but from personal experience, the only thing you're really encountering is yourself.
Right.
Okay. Just like you can say all the demons are inside you or are part of you, all the good stuff is too.
Right.
You want to see the devil look in the mirror, all those things.
Right.
It's you.
Milo the Cat said something interesting about, if you want, like they'll come into the occult, I want to deal with demons. He's like, well, go to a bar, a mean bar at 3 a.m. and try to get them all to mow your lawn the next morning.
Yeah, that's it.
Just as much. But I think this analogy of like, I don't know, I just thought that was great way of...
No, but that's exactly true.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing you're controlling is yourself. The thing
Right.
you're facing is yourself.
He also
Your
said the
companion
scariest thing was yourself. Yeah.
Of course,
Sorry to
because,
interrupt.
well, that's where the fear is.
Yeah.
And it's not about laughing at the inappropriate time to just dispel because you're nervous or something.
Right.
Paralyzing fear, debilitating fear, I think is something you confront. And
Terror, you could call it.
yeah, terror.
Even though it's becomes this other thing now.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
go
it's
on.
terror.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's freezing. It freezes you.
Right.
You know, the universe is a joke. Okay, the whole thing is a joke. The thing that upsets us is when we realize it's always a joke. We're the butt of the joke, but we're all having that joke on us individually.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
That's why when we all start bitching at each other, we're like, well, yeah, you think you got it bad, you know, and then we can fight about it. But we're all the butt of our own joke.
Right.
That's our experience of the universe. That's why the laughter is necessary. Humility is necessary, and yet you have to have self-respect.
Right.
It's all these dichotomies, but whenever you have these opposites and you're trying to annihilate them or blend them, there's magically, I could go into a bunch of crap basically to explain different ways that you annihilate them or you balance them in all these different ways, and we can draw hexagrams in the whole thing. But whenever you're trying to reconcile things that are opposites in some kind of way, it's absurd, okay, to our rational mind. It's an absurdity. And what is the right way to respond to an absurdity? Is laughter.
Right.
You can experience terror if you want,
Right.
but
that's not necessarily very healthy.
laughter is going to help you a lot better.
Right. I liked Robert Anton Wilson's response of like like we don't know what's going to happen when I walk out the door tomorrow morning or whatever, but to have a positive outlook, like I'm going to have a good day because yesterday I had a good day, and I won't get hit by a car because maybe yesterday I won't, and I'll look both ways when I cross the street, like I've been told as a kid. But he's said it in terms of it being positive is a healthy way to think, and to laugh is a healthy response rather than why isn't the world going my way, and feeling persecuted and like I'm not safe, which I think fear a lot of is at the base of people's anger and so forth.
Sure.
At the bottom of their don't feel safe and they're afraid and they respond with anger and so forth. Let's see if the cameras are still running. Have they chosen?
Our
Oh,
mouths are still running, but are the cameras still running?
This camera's still running. That camera's still running. I think we're good.
Okay.
I'm very happy with all of that. That was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I had a good time.
I've had a great time.
Sue, you didn't say anything.
This was terrific.